The room is filling up again. There was obviously a lot of talk during coffee break, lots of discussions. I'm very glad that you take the opportunity to clarify whatever has to be clarified. We go into the second round of our question and answer morning. I ask everybody to be prepared for further questions that you have. It will not be difficult for the moment because we have one question left from before the coffee break, and after everybody is seated, we should proceed with the catch box.
Okay. My name is René Forsberg. I'm from DTU Space in Denmark, also a member of ACHEO. And I had a question really on what's up there or planned to be up there from other space agencies. And I partly answered already some questions I had. So I'd like to ask SKIM first, what is your inspiration in terms of, say, heritage from CFOSAT in this mission? And for FORUM, we just heard about a couple of US mission and a Canadian mission. This was also the principle of far infrared was also mentioned in the decadal plan. So how is the coordination, or could you imagine that the sequence of 3 foreign missions could actually fulfill the needs of the climate community?
Excuse me, we couldn't understand the question. Could you please repeat it?
I'll just say the space agencies, NASA and especially, had it on the decadal plan for a far infrared mission also. And you mentioned, your colleague just mentioned the mission called Clarero, which was going on a Pathfinder in 2023, I understand. So will that in some way overlap with FORUM? And could it possibly, if for some reason you're not selected, could it actually fulfill to some degree the climate modeling need for the far infrared signatures?
Question to SKIM as well. SKIM first.
So who's starting?
There are 2 questions.
So now the first question is towards which SKIM, and the second one is towards FORUM.
No, it's clear. Thank you. Yeah, so in terms of heritage, so clearly we learned a lot, and we're learning a lot from CFOSAT today in terms of measuring waves down to a wavelength of about 70 meters. And the physics of the measurement in KU band, it's somewhat similar to what we get in Ka band. A Ka band is closer to optical, so the mean square slope is larger, the signal is larger, so we get something a bit different. The difficulty with CFOSAT is that it doesn't separate the waves going in both directions, so you can do a Doppler correction from CFOSAT, and CFOSAT is only doing waves. And again, SKIM main goal is to get the total surface current velocity and Stokes drift. And clearly the Stokes drift part is dominated by waves shorter than 40, 50 meter wavelengths. So with CFOSAT, if you try to estimate Stokes drift from a CFOSAT spectrum, you get 20% of Stokes drift. If you do that with a SKIM spectrum, you get 80%, and that's true for the Stokes drift. It's also true for the wave energy. If you look at how much of the energy is resolved by a CFOSAT mission, it's around 80% in the big ocean basins, but it's about 30% or less in the Baltic Sea, for example, or all the inland seas, whereas SKIM going to shorter waves, because in inland seas, waves are shorter, then we'll actually be able to resolve waves and the short wave periods that are very important for coastal hazards. And that's unique in SKIM to be able to get the wave period in all these areas, because the coastal hazards, the sea level right at the coast, when you get storm surge and overtopping and actual flooding on land, that's driven mostly by the wave period, not so much by the wave height. One thing that we'll learn, and so CFOSAT has a nadir beam, so there's some altimetry being done on CFOSAT, but of course it doesn't have a precise orbit determination, so it can actually do sea level properly. But there's still some studies to use CFOSAT and start working on the SSB. But this is where SKIM will actually go much further, because with sea-state bias, actually having the full spectrum down to 30 meters when you have all the fluctuations with wind seas and swells, then the tail actually higher, shorter wavelengths, something you can parameterize a bit. And we have the wind, the backscatter, and everything to do that. We actually have all the information to really understand what is a sea-tail bias, how much coming from a tracker noise on the altimeter, how much actually is geophysical. And that's something that's already started with past missions that we can work much better with SKIM in the future.
Anything to add?
And
Okay.
one thing I could add, finally, so we talk about CFOSAT here, but there's also some things we're learning a lot from other missions, and in particular Sentinel-1. There's been a lot of effort to improve on the quality of the retrieval of the attitude of Sentinel-1, and that has been work ongoing in the last year and a half, and finally it's coming to fruition. We're finally getting maps of one component of the surface current velocity at a very coarse time and space resolution, but it's already a start. So we're getting these global maps from a wave mode on Sentinel-1, and it will come in the future, I'm sure, from the IW mode. And SKIM has Doppler, and SKIM can actually measure the same kind of quantity, but on a much higher resolution with a much better revisit. So we're learning a lot from Sentinel-1, and we've learned that we can do the pointing from the data. That's a demonstration that was done there. So I think that really demonstrates the full heritage of the capability of using data-driven calibration solutions for fixing issues on like Doppler attitude on platforms.
Okay. Let's move on to Forum.
And you were talking more about the future missions for Forum. Okay, so I will talk a little bit about Clario, and then I'll pass to Quentin to talk a little bit about pre-fire and tick-fire, which were the two missions he mentioned. So Clario was originally a NASA Decadal Survey mission. It was intended to contain a long-wave spectrometer, which would have covered the range of Forum, and a short-wave spectrometer, as well as radio occultation measurements. And the main goal of Clario was to act as an international calibration standards lab in space. What happened is that the mission has been downscoped somewhat. It suffered slightly from the Trump effect because it was sold as a climate mission. And it now has been downscaled to a Pathfinder mission. This Pathfinder mission will fly on the International Space Station in the 2021-2022 timeframe. It's only scheduled to last for a year, but there is hope that it might extend to 2 years. So it won't really be within the Forum timeframe. And the key point is that it will only be measuring the shortwave reflected spectrum. So in a sense, it sort of fills the other end of the spectrum from Forum. Okay, so by having if you had the two at the same time, you would actually get potentially the complete electromagnetic spectrum, missing out a little bit of the microwave and a little bit of the UV. Actually, if Truths flies, which is the other mission that's a bit like Clario Pathfinder, and which does look like it might fly in the same time frame, if that goes ahead, then that would really give ESA a European Clario in its original concept. I'll pass to Quentin to discuss the other two.
First, I'd like to stress that the question whether we need hyperspectral observations of the long-wave spectrum at the top of atmosphere, it was never a question. The question was really when. When can we achieve this? Because it's been obvious to the space observations community that we need those kind of measurements. And the proof is that the first observation measurements were dealing with this Earth energy budget. Back in the 70s, we already had this volunteer to cover spectrally the spectrum. And now it's possible. And the fact that pre-fire and tick-fire are also involved in this process are really the consequence of the technology maturity. Theoretical works date back to the late 80s, and people already showing how this data could be used to constrain climate models. Theoretical works on cloud optical properties, they didn't wait for observations at the top of atmosphere. And so basically what we are missing now is not the theory, is not how we will use those data, is really the data themselves.
Just a question, will pre-fire collect data globally or just in the Arctic?
So pre-fire is focused on the Arctic. Technically it covers everywhere, and then depending on the data, the amount of data they can transfer down to the surface, there will be less coverage in the other places. So they will try to transfer as much data as possible from the Arctic. And tick-fire will probably be the same thing. And because they are lower cost, it's like $50 million the cost of such a mission. It's more like an opportunity, given they have the technology. And it will serve for sure as a precursor, because it will, well, pre-fire at least will be flying before Forum, if Forum eventually flies. And so all the experience that will be gained with Prefire will, of course, be of strong support for the data analysis of FORUM data.
Okay.
On the subject of upcoming sensors, there's also a strong complementarity to the Ice Cloud Imager on MATOP second generation. That uses a different frequency range, the sub-millimeter spectral range. And the physics work out so that there you are sensitive to a bit thicker clouds, so above a few grams per square meter, upwards from that, so up to really, really thick clouds. And FORUM is covering the range, as we heard yesterday, from a few tens of grams and then downwards to thinner clouds. So the two missions really complement each other very strongly.
Okay. So we go to the next question. This gentleman in the back, please. Microphone will come from this side, I guess.
Thank you. Leo Maas, Utrecht University. I'm a bit envious as oceanographer that you're going to promise fields at the surface of the ocean. And I'm just wondering, in your breakdown of the variance into geostrophic currents and Stokes drift, whether you're actually drowning some of the other signals that might be there, both in the surface layer, like Langmuir circulation, or coming up from below, like internal tides, rectified flows, density currents. So can you comment whether or can you answer the question whether in your interpretation of your data you're using models to kind of break down this variance, or whether it's really unambiguous?
So can you hand over the microphone to your neighbor, because he's the next one. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a very good question. So we've based all our, well, not all, but a lot of our analysis on high-resolution models that contain some of the reality, but not everything. I mean, we know there's a lot of subgrid scale details in the real ocean. Some of that is actually resolved, so we have these range resolved measurements at level 1, and so we can probably get to see, of course, the wave modulation and this wave modulation and groups and structures of that. But in terms of currents, if we start actually from a small scale, the Langmuir circulations are driven by the energy exchange from the wave field through the Stokes drift by the Craig-Leibovich process that actually uses the shear of the wind-driven part and the Stokes drift to make these Langmuir circulations. So having the Stokes drift measurements is really the first time we actually be able to say something about the generation of Langmuir circulation globally. So it's of course a subgrid process, but through the waves we actually access some of that. All the internal wave field will be actually resolved in a lot of the measurements at level 1, and we'll get some, even the level 2 pixels, we'll get something that's, that will not be resolved with 30 kilometer pixel, of course, then all that stuff gets washed away, but you actually go inside of the data, you can learn a lot about this. And certainly in terms of how much of the variance we're representing, if you take the drifter data, and that's the exercise we've done, the surface drifter data, right at the surface, basically, we show that, we see in the data that the geostrophy is maybe 1/3 of that signal in terms of kinetic energy. Then you have the average wind-driven part, maybe 10–50%, that the equivalent part. And everything else, which is in this hourly time series of drifters, a lot of that is contained in near-inertial oscillations. And that's the first time that we'll be able to measure globally near-inertial oscillations that have a very strong impact on the ocean, because they actually bring energy from the wind down to the basement of mixed layer, and that shear at the base of the mixed layer will then drive internal waves and mixing all the way to the abyss. I mean, if you're talking about Walter Bank and his abyssal recipes, we need this 1 terawatt to mix the property of the ocean at the bottom of the ocean. Some of that's coming from the tide, some of that's coming near oscillations. We don't know yet. We've never measured this globally. And that will have a big impact in understanding the climate system and the energy cycle of the full ocean and the climate. So maybe Peter Brandt could add some more on that, tropical or other point of views.
Okay, fine.
Maybe I can just add a little bit to the inertial oscillations that are quite strong signal, and we measure with SKIM the inertial oscillations. And the point is, of course, that we have not the revisit to really capture, we're analyzing the inertial oscillation, but the inertial oscillations have a large spatial coherence. And they're also coherent in time over a few inertial oscillation periods. And so we can estimate with SKIM such velocities, the amplitude of inertial oscillations, and there's given a quite nice example in our report showing how we can separate inertial oscillations from the balanced flow, from the geostrophic flow. And I think with SKIM, we have the first time the chance really to estimate amplitude of inertial oscillation on a global scale. And with this, we get a better handle on how much energy of these inertial waves is really dissipated at the base of the mixed layer and how much energy is available to propagate near inertial waves equatorward and downward to enhance the deep mixing in the ocean. And that's, for me, it's really a great progress, a great chance that we get, that we have with these SKIM observations, the possibility to contribute to the understanding of the ocean mixing, which is still a quite open question.
Yeah, so just by saying, so the mixing of ocean and water masses, which is setting the temperature, salinity, and also the carbon content of the water masses, that's the main storage reservoir is the ocean. So how the mixing is controlled by these fast motions is very important to setting the ocean state that then interacts with the atmosphere, and that's really the big flywheel in the climate system in the ocean. So we need to set these properties of the water masses right, and for that we need to get better parameterizations that we learn from the energy fluxes estimated from SKIM. That's a direct path from the SKIM measurement through the parameterizations all the way to the future climate forecasting systems.
Okay, next question, please.
Thank you. Richard Banges from Imperial College London and the National Centre for Earth Observation. I have a question that I'd like to aim to both missions, if I may, please. It's something that's been touched on previously regarding the legacy of the individual missions. So my question would be, is if your mission was only flown once and you had one set of observations for the mission's lifetime, given we operate in a world where the climate and ocean current systems that are evolving, what is the legacy of those observations in the future, and what are the value of those observations in the future? Are they only valid and insightful for the period in which those observations are obtained, or do they have benefit for the future?
Okay, my internal sequence tells me SKIM is first.
Thank you. Yes, it's a very good question. We have this plan to fly for 5 years with possible extension to 7. That's the plan. But clearly, SKIM sits in this larger family of Earth observation systems. It's a new child in this family, in the sense that it's bringing these three very simple idea of making Doppler measurements, and that's really new. Having this conical scan, and then having an ideal altimeter. And so having an ideal altimeter and doing these other things actually makes it very, very close to a standard altimeter system. You just have to change a little bit. I don't want to undermine all the work that's been done to this, because actually technically it's very challenging, but they've done it. But basically, if one SKIM flies, we'll never do an ideal altimeter as we do today. It makes no sense. The ideal altimeter, it's a great machine. It was very good 25 years ago. Now they are amazing systems, but they keep looking straight down. It's like a horse with blinkers. Just remove the blinkers, look to the sides. And that's the future. The future altimeters will be SKIMs if we are selected. And that will give you the wide swath and the revisit that you never get otherwise. There's been all these studies to have constellations of 10s, 20, 30 altimeters. If you actually work it out, one SKIM is equivalent to 3 ideal altimeters in terms of revisit time.
Direct question to SKIM?
Sorry, I don't think you answered my question, though, about the value in the future. If there isn't another SKIM in the future, so you don't have those observations at multiple angles, is there any future value to the SKIM observations, or are they just valuable for the period
long-term,
which they observe?
So, of course, the value of the mission is during its lifetime, and the long-term value comes in many different ways. First, you have to, for example, talk about currents, which is the first goal of SKIM. So today we have estimation of currents coming from radial altimetry combined with gravity measurements, and actually drifters are used to define the mean dynamic topography, because the altimeters only give you an anomaly of the SSH. So you need to have a background knowledge of the mean circulation of the ocean. Now, with SKIM, we'll get the best ever mean dynamic topography at the resolution. It's just unbelievable and not possible to do with gravity mission, because with gravity you have to fly very low to get high resolution. You don't get right to the surface. You can use altimetry to get gradients, so there's some studies to actually get the slope of the surface, but that's very difficult. So if you actually get directly the mean dynamic topography, you can go back to the full altimetric record and actually improve not just for 5 years, but for 40 years and get better impact. So that's a really long-term legacy of SKIM measurements, even if we don't do it again, which, I mean, it's impossible. I mean, people want altimeter for sea level. We need altimeter for sea level. We just transform them into SKIM. So it's just impossible that nothing happens after SKIM.
Okay, this is a conclusive answer.
Thank you.
So talking about the long-term value, I mean, a lot of the forum science is related to understanding climate feedbacks and the underlying processes. And if you can use these in the 4 years and then improve the models, of course the predictions that they make for the next decades and century or so will be better, and that will be a long-term value of this measurement, independent whether there's a follow-on mission.
Okay.
Perhaps to add to that, I mean, one obvious legacy thing is that we will have a benchmark measurement of the outgoing long-wave spectrum now. So scientists in 50 years or in 100 years, they will wonder what it has been now. I mean, like we are wondering, what was it in pre-industrial times? Of course, we don't know. And there's no way to make measurements in the past. So and we are establishing a benchmark now. So that is a legacy that will stand.
As a final compliment, I'd like to stress and to come back again to the 70s data. Very surprisingly, they've been used. And I mean, people have been used those data in the early 2000s. And the idea was to say, well, this is the snapshot of the climate or of the Earth in the 70s. And now we have the image now, and we can make a comparison and say, well, this is the forcing due to CO2. This is the change in the forcing due to water vapor. And even though those were short periods of measurements, it gives a snapshot of the climate at one point. So if we do the same thing with FORUM, in 20 years, at least people can say, well, luckily we do have one snapshot. We would like to have it like run forever, but already having this snapshot, it's 1 point on a line which could be quite complex. So it's a big thing. I mean, it will be very useful.
Okay.
Yeah, if I may just add something to that. So I was actually involved in some of those studies. So I'm just going to say something a little bit about them. So we had, as Quentin said, we did have some measurements in the 1970s that went down to 400 inverse centimeters. I mentioned them a little bit yesterday for a very short period of time. With those, we were able to compare those measurements with spectral measurements that were taken in the late 90s. And we showed that you could, with those measurements, clearly see signatures of greenhouse gas increases and forcings directly in the spectrum from methane. This was in the mid-infrared. The issue with those spectra is that the calibration quality, the spectral resolution, and the spatial sampling was not sufficient to be able to look at the feedbacks, which are a little bit more subtle and require this high accuracy and high spectral resolution that we're seeking with FORUM. So that FORUM really will truly be a benchmark measurement that we can revisit in the future because of its high radiometric accuracy, and have confidence that when we make the comparisons, even if there is a gap in the record, that we have truly characterized the climate state at that period in time for a sustained period of time. Thank you.
Okay. So we move on to the next question.
Okay. So Pierre-Yves Le Traon, Mercator Ocean International. We are in charge for the European Union of the implementation of the Copernicus Marine Service that provides operational forecast of the ocean state at global and regional scale. We see a lot of potential, in addition to an improved understanding of the upper ocean circulation and many discoveries we expect from SKIM. We also see a lot of potential of using SKIM data together with satellite altimetry to improve operational ocean forecast, I mean, for surface current for sure, and so on. You mentioned in your presentation that there are some issues, I mean, R&D's issue on how to best use surface current in operational, in forecast model. Could you elaborate a little more on the different steps you see during the lifetime of SKIM, if it's selected, to ensure that the data will be tested and will be possibly on the longer run ingested into operational models?
Thank you, Pierre. So so we started this discussion with CMEBs, as you know, and ICMWF and other weather centers, and basically there's different steps. So there's already the transformation of the models. I'm talking now first about the global models that are going through this transformation, actually being able to have a wave current coupled system and also some coupling with atmosphere, which is being done at UK Met Office, for example, but it's also coming out now online in the future plans with CMEMS. So the models first have to be placed. If you don't have the physics, then you cannot check, and you can also then assimilate. That's for the global. There's of course all the regional systems of CMEMS that have already working with total surface current velocity measurements. So SKIM will measure the total surface current measurement. And these are already being assimilated from HF radars in small coastal areas, and of course that has a huge impact on these systems. I'm thinking about the Spanish systems, the one in the German Bight, for example, which is run at SAG. So there's really a lot of things that can be expanded from these coastal applications and retaking the HF radar example all the way to the global ocean. And they have their observation in place, so the observation. The observation operator is actually developed for these coastal systems, and that can actually be transplanted, I'm sure, relatively straightforward in the global system, although the scales, the parts are different, so there's some studies to be done in that area, for sure. And we can rely, and so that's why also we've developed this user community system and these open source simulator tools, which first can answer very simple user questions like, okay, what's the resolution, what does it look like? And all the works have been done to develop what's called a skimulator is really about this, so that people get on board, they can actually get a feeling for, in their area, with their model inputs, they can run the skimulator, apply the error sources, and see what's looked like and what the benefit they can get. So that was really the first step, and so people have been trained, so we will do more training of that if we're selected to do this.
Okay, thank you. Fine. So we a short update on the queue. So next question will be here. Then there will be Peter. Then there will be you. Then there will be this gentleman in the very back. Then there will be this gentleman in the very left from your perspective, very right from my perspective, and then there will be this lady on the to my left side, to your right side. So this is and then you, and then I'm afraid, yeah, got it. And then I'm afraid we will hit the 11:55. If there is more space with short answers, we can take some more questions if there are some more questions. So we start the queue.
If needed.
Tony from ECMWF again, sorry. So there's a famous interview question, what's your biggest weakness? And the cliched answer is, I am too modest. So if the teams could avoid the cliched answer, could they identify what the single biggest risk to their project delivering the science that they claim is?
Forum first, this time. This time.
Exactly. He just pinched my answer. That's not fair. Tiziana, were you putting your hand up, or were you just looking at me? Okay, all right, fine.
Well, this.
Yes. Well.
This is the answer.
No, it's hard to think of one. To delivering the science, it's difficult because the science is, a lot of the science is actually getting the far infrared radiance spectra. So if the mission launches correctly and the instrument works correctly, and the technical maturity is there and the science maturity is there, then we already have the spectra for the first time. In terms of delivering the science, I guess one thing that we need to work perhaps a little harder on, that's been potentially pulled up in this community, is engaging a little bit more strongly with climate modelers, more climate modelers than we have already. So I would say we already have strong links with certain centres in the US and in the UK, but we could make that link stronger, and that would certainly help us deliver the science better.
Okay, Skim.
All right, so of course the biggest risk is not to be selected, but that's, I guess, will be sorted out shortly. No, one thing that we worked a lot on is and is still not enough work on that area, is really the user uptake. And I've been in this business of working with NWP for 20 years, and I know how long it takes to get new ideas into operational. And so this is why we've been so much effort on getting the systems out, training people, organizing workshops, because, you know, we're talking about fast track. It's relatively fast track, and time flies. I've seen that with the SWOT mission. You know, 7 years is really there, and so it's really a revolution. So I have to get people ready for a revolution. And you know, people imagine things about the surface currents, but it's not. And even what we imagine today, we'll find that there's more details, there's more richness. And so getting people ready to actually use that data, I think is really the biggest challenge we're facing here.
Okay. So we come to Peter.
Hello, I'm Piet Stammers. I'm a member of ACO and working at KNMI. My question to both teams is about the spatial and the temporal variability. On the screen we see two very nice Earth globes, and they represent emitted radiation, and they represent surface currents on the ocean at one moment. But these are model results, and both missions are sampling heavily, have small pixels, small swaths, relatively, to global coverage in one day. So how do you deal with this variation in space and in time for FORUM with monthly maps only for the radiation, and with SKIM for, you show 10-day filling the globe, but then the currents have changed. So how do you deal with that?
Yeah, with FORUM, one should mention that we have about 10,000 samples in 1 month in a latitudinal band of 10 degrees around the equator, for example. And this is an enormous amount of data, and you can apply different sampling strategies. For example, if you have an INU, you can look at the Pacific or West or Indian Ocean. If you go higher up, usually people use actually monthly mean values. For example, in the SWOS days in the stratosphere and in the lowermost stratosphere, and the variability there in this data is about 10% or so, to 20% from a year to several years. And if you look, for example, in the upper troposphere in the tropics, let's say 10 kilometers, we have looked in MLS data, so the variability can be 10 to 40% in the zonal average. And with El Niño, it can be up to 40%, in between 10%. If you look at single observations, the variability can be as high as 50% or so. But if you are there dealing with average values, you could get more like 10, 20, 30% variability. And that is for the zonal mean. But of course, we have so many measurements that we can really look into sampling strategies where we average over selected regions for special purposes.
Stefan?
I can perhaps add to that we can also use the model-to-satellite approach to really use the measurement on the pixel scale by just selecting the appropriate pixels from the model. And actually, our scale of about 15 kilometers is kind of converging to the scale that the climate models are going. We have now the Diamond project with global intercomparison of climate models going into the storm resolving scale of a few kilometers, where they're running without parameterized correction. And this kind of models, one strategy to evaluate them is to build in the forward simulator into the model itself and output only the actual satellite measurements as the model runs, and then we can correlate that to the observations and evaluate it.
Okay. Do you want to add something?
No, I will leave,
I'll leave it there.
Thank you.
All
Skim?
right, thank you. Very good question. So first I want to maybe correct a few things. So the swath of SKIM is 300 kilometers, right? So it actually gives an average revisit of 3 days. Of course, not everywhere, so that when you fill the gaps and everything, it's more like 10 days when we do the product. And you have to also to realize that the time scale of the ocean, some of them are much slower. I know these things you see here on the right, the Gulf Stream, and the typical time scale, 10 days is 100 kilometers. So scales that are larger than 100 kilometers, they don't change too much in 10 days for the balanced part. Now, of course, you have the unbalanced part, and we came back on this issue with near inertial oscillations or the tides that have fast periods, but they are coherent in space and time. So you can use this space-time coherence to use not just a single point measurement, but all the points around that to actually build up a very high-resolved time series of these motions. And so actually we've made some studies, and probably in the end we'll get some level 2D gridded product at a hourly resolution of these inertial oscillations and internal wave currents. So there's actually a lot of potential for resolving things that you could think would be highest, but actually they're not because they're coherent in space and time. So maybe Ernesto could add a few more to that, I don't know.
So again, Ernesto Rodriguez from JPL. The navier-stokes go down to molecular level, so you can't ever sample everything. And I think that the early presentation by Fabrice had a very clear square that sampled a lot of interesting products that are outside the current sampling, especially in time, of the current altimeter constellation. Not only in time, but also it's impossible for geostrophic velocities to give an accurate picture in the tropics. So if you look at the equatorial period, the equatorial region, this will be the first ever measurements that will be available. And they have a slow and spatially large temporal scale. And they will be fully sampled for the first time. But there are many other things that you can do with sampling that has a wavelength resolution of about 60 kilometers. If you consider what current nadir altimeters can do, this is what they can do along a single track, so that's just a single component of the velocity. SKIM, because it has a swath, will actually get both things much faster than any other mission, including swath. So I think the fast sampling is, with a 3-day sampling on a global scale, is unprecedented.
Okay. If we want to get through with all the questions, please accelerate your answers. and also accelerate your questions, and then we will have a soft landing at shortly before 12 o'clock. So next question is here.
Good afternoon. I'm David Wolf from Heriot-Watt University. I think necessarily the process for this is all quite dry. We talk a lot about technical feasibility, things we know we can measure. And I think, these are Explorer candidates. So there should be some excitement of discovery, the unknown. So I'd like to ask the scientists from both candidates to say a little bit about big science questions that they hope that their mission will be able to either answer or enable the answer of. Thank you.
Thank you. And the SKIM starts, I think, this time.
I think it's a very good question. We're going to explore something that nobody's measured before, and that's actually a challenge. There's certainly big questions like the energy cycle of the ocean how the energy goes there, how the mixing happens, and the mixing setup, as I said, the properties of water masses. And so that getting that energy cycle right in the ocean is really a big question, not just for oceanography, but the climate system in general. There's always a big question areas on the evolution of the Arctic and the transport of heat and fresh water around the Arctic. You have we're going to have a lot of freshwater runoff melting from the ice sheets. Where is it going? Is it going to prevent the deep water formation and convection? Is that going to stop the Gulf Stream? These kind of things. All the AMOC at some point is regulated by the surface density field of the ocean. And the AMOC, the meridional overturning circulation that set up the long-term system of the climate. And that really depends on the surface properties of temperature, salinity, and they are being affected by currents. So today we cannot track them, and tomorrow with SKIM, if selected, we will. That's the scale of the oceans. There was this question yesterday about the gradients. I didn't really answer properly, but I can use the opportunity. So we're going to resolve vorticity scales down to 70 kilometers and divergence field. Nobody has ever measured divergence of the ocean. We will measure divergence, the upwellings. Upwellings that bring life and nutrients and fisheries, but also bring carbon to the surface. So if you want to do carbon tracking and carbon monitoring on the global scale, you need to have the carbon coming up from the ocean. It's not just sinking in the ocean, it's also coming back up in these upwelling regions. And there was this beautiful example of animation of these divergence fields at the equator that have scales of 500 kilometers, and nobody has ever measured before, and that will be measured for the first time by SKIM. And bringing the connection from the surface, because the surface of the ocean is not just sitting on its own by itself, it's actually connecting the full atmosphere to the full ocean depth through the upwelling and all the mixing.
Okay, thank you. In the interest of time, I would like to move to FORUM.
Okay, I will start with Stefan.
So I start, and then perhaps Helen can extend. So I would say that the biggest climate research question of all is the question of climate sensitivity. And as Helen has shown nicely in her presentation yesterday, the uncertainty is dominated by the big feedbacks, the water vapor feedback and the high cloud feedback, and low cloud feedback also. And two of these important feedbacks, the high cloud feedback and the water vapor feedback, they happen in a spectral range that we are not observing today. So this is our big science question, and there we will make our contribution. Narrow down climate sensitivity.
Cristiano Maestri, University of Bologna. I'm interested in clouds, and I think that that will be a big jump in knowledge of cloud properties, because we don't have a characterization of the signal of the clouds in the far infrared. And some years ago, when we started to compare data in the shortwave and in the mid-infrared, we saw that the cloud models, the cloud radiative models that we have were not coherent, and we had to change all our parameterization because we were computing cloud properties with different methodologies. So we don't have nothing in the far infrared. We don't know how the signal is characterized. We don't know if our models are correct or not. And this is one thing. And then potentially we can retrieve cloud properties that we are now not retrieving, like, for example, habit. We have a lot of habit sensitivity in the far infrared that is potentially retrieving. It gives us the potential to extend the range in which we can constrain the cloud properties and add new properties. And
I should add here, habit is the crystal shape.
Okay. Sorry. And just one thing, spectroscopy. We don't know how the rotational band of water vapor acts up there, because the only measurement we have, a very detailed measurement of the rotational lines and continuum of water vapor that we analyzed are from below, that are very different conditions from the ground, and so spectroscopy will be another thing. Okay, sorry.
Thank you. So we come to this gentleman to the back.
In recent results of ocean models and coupled IRC wave models at high resolution have shown that there's a tremendous wealth of vertical transport of energy, momentum, moisture on scales below 100 kilometers. Now, both missions should be able to see that, one more in the atmosphere and one more at the surface. There's a tremendous sensitivity to the physics in models, in the parameterization of physics. So, for example, the drag on the surface or the roughness on waves and currents, or the transport in the atmosphere, the vertical transport. You both have talked about working with climate modelers to look into improving the models, but they tend to blur out things on those scales and correct them with just adding a bias. Are you planning on working with more process-orientated studies as well? That would seem to it would improve the climate models in the long run.
So that's Kim first, and then Forum. Please, a short answer.
Right, so in terms of working with the climate committee, I guess it's a question around these issues. So there's a GWEX group, gas on the stresses and what's happening in boundary layers. Is very strong biases in NWP models. For example, ECMWF has a 10-degree bias on the wind direction, which is not understood. Some of that must come from maybe cloud stuff, but also the surface ocean stress. And that's a place where actually when you have the wind minus the current, and when you do wind minus current squared, that actually has a much bigger impact in your stress, and that's true for the wind stress, but actually goes through the latent heat flux, and that's probably actually more important in that region. So that's one important aspect. And the other important aspect in the parameterization, so there's already IPCC AR6 models that have included Stokes drift in their language parameterization, especially from GFDL, and they're showing a very big impact on the mixed layer depths, which is setting the SST, and that's super important for then FC fluxes.
Okay.
Thank you. I'm going to pass the question to Stefan.
Thanks. As you pointed out, it's very difficult to go from observations to actually improving parameterizations in models. And traditionally, this has been made even more difficult by there was a scale disconnect. And global models had very coarse resolutions. And some of the physics in those models, if I take the cloud physics as an example, it's based on physics, nucleation rates and uptake coefficients and things like that. But it's not really driven directly by the model fields, because the model fields represent some kind of average over a large area, whereas the microphysics should be driven by the local conditions. This is I think there's some hope that we can make some progress on this, because we are going to the storm resolving scale. And of course, okay, that's still many orders of magnitude away from the microphysics, but it's eliminating some of the disconnect. Because, for example, when the model produces its own convection, we're getting rid of the convective parameterization that has a lot of tuning parameters that we can always use as excuses for model and observations not agreeing. So it's, as the climate models are moving to the kilometer scale, not for long runs, but for running shorter periods and comparing with observations, it gets much more meaningful to make this comparison. And there's already activities going on, for example, with the big Eureka campaign that's happening next January to February near Barbados, of really running very high resolution models and running intense observation campaigns at the same time, and really trying to bring us together more than it has been possible to do hitherto. And I think in this kind of frame set of working with these high resolution models, I think Forum can also be used to a large benefit.
Thank you. So we have 2 more questions in 0 minutes. We will still try to realize this. Please, first one, and short question, short answer.
Short question for SKIM, because you mentioned, human life being saved, and there's one aspect no one mentioned yet, and it is actually in the report. Freak waves or rogue waves is actually what we believe is caused by the interaction of currents and waves. So what do you want to do with it, and do you plan any products that would actually help save lives?
Short answer, please.
Yeah, so there's, actually I addressed that yesterday, but basically we have currents and waves together, so we have actually understanding measurement of high waves in currents, which is very important. And also the full wave directional spectrum gives us access to freak waves even where there's no current, and that can also happen. Because the extreme waves depend on the shape of the wave spectrum, and today we have no wave measurement of the shape of the spectrum, only down to 70 meters. So SKIM will measure the full wave spectrum Yeah, it's in the products. Yeah, it's a level 2 C wave product and 2D products. Yes, with wave and current together.
Okay, thank you. Last question, please.
Thank you, Daniel Hauser from France. My question is again on RC fluxes. You mentioned yesterday that one of the objectives is also to use observation to improve our knowledge about this RC exchanges. We know that the stress is the main parameters in these exchanges. Could you comment about how your observations could help to better estimate this wind stress and use this in the global model, either weather forecast or climate models?
Yeah, it's a very good question. So there's no direct measurement of stress, but there's also a lot of ways where you can get some proxy and get the right parameters in these. We know there's some drag laws with wind and current together you can combine. So today we're only using a drag law that is applied to wind, and so we put the current in there. But what I would also emphasize is that the stress is essentially a flux of momentum, and then you have storage of momentum, and that momentum is stored in the current. So by observing the current, you're actually observing how this momentum is stored. And for example, in a hurricane, we have very strong stress and flux. In the wake of the hurricane, you have all these very strong currents driven by that. And that will be observed by SKIM for the first time. We'll be able to see these very large currents that do a lot of mixing in the ocean behind the hurricanes. And that will be a very powerful way to actually back out what was the stress during the storm. So I don't know, Jimmy, if you want to add something about the stress and RC fluxes in general.
Okay, so Michael, yeah. Do you want to add something?
Yes.
Short? Yeah.
So just to add to that, we know that if you ignore the total surface current velocity when you're parameterizing gas transfer, you inherently include a bias in that. Because if you use the wind velocity versus the water is less than the wind velocity versus the land. So you have to have that current component to be able to identify that bias. And then that bias is then inherited throughout your calculations of gas fluxes. And certainly there's been some work that was published last month where they showed if you don't have this coupling in the Southern Ocean, for example, you can actually have an error of up to 30% of your net sink value in the Southern Ocean. So it really is very important to have the total surface current information.
Okay. That was a paper by John Marshall et al. In JGR last month.
Now, Michael has informed me that there is a final question that I overlooked. I apologize. You were trying to get into the cube for very long. Please.
Okay, thank you. Well, I asked the first question. Maybe I'll ask the last question of this meeting. So my question is related to the fact that you fly in tandem with SKA, because we were responsible for SKA trouble processing and work with the user community, international science teams. And what we face at the moment is that we see differences between models and observations that we actually cannot explain unless we get more information, like the total surface vector current. So I think it's really exciting that you fly together with SKA, because then we will still see those differences, and we probably can explain better what aspects of the ocean-atmosphere exchange are missing in models
I'm curious about your question.
The question is, what prospect does the team see in this synergy between SKA and SKIM?
Short answer, please.
Thank you, Ed. There's essentially, we're adding one more variable in the mix, which is a current. So then interpreting your sigma naught to getting the winds from a scatometer is ambiguous, because you have only this one variable to characterize the surface. So if you add the current is one, the full wave spectrum is another one, and that gives you many more variables to play with. And so you can go into deep learning, you can go into many things to interpret better these sigma naught variability. And actually, we plan at some point to be able to use the sigma naught from SKA directly in our inversion algorithm with all the Doppler to come up better with a full joint inversion of wind, wave, and current and stress. And that will be much more powerful. And that will probably lead into future work in the next generation of scatterometers, which is possibly evolution for METOP second generation or third generations.
Okay, thank you. And this concludes the discussion. Just a few final words from my side before the Director Earth Observation will release all of you. No. you will be needed. At least some of you, but everybody of you will be needed for the whole continuing process. First of all, thanks a lot for all the discussion. Thanks a lot for the engaged answers and the engaged questions again. Thanks a lot to the support with the famous catch cube and the ladies who were supplying the microphones. Thanks very much. I appreciate and we appreciate all the participants out in the internet. It's a pity that they cannot join us for lunch. This is real world here, and you are out there somewhere. So we will have a good taste here of a British lunch. I'm sure. No, this was not meant as a joke. But before we come to that, I want to give you a short update of what will follow. After lunch, the ACEO will meet, and we will meet until tomorrow at noon. And by that, we will or must have a decision of a recommendation to ESA. This includes, and I'm very happy that we have both teams available through this afternoon, and the team leaders for tomorrow morning for questions that come up in the discussion within ACEO, so that we can clarify whatever is necessary on a more, should I say, private atmosphere, with a more private atmosphere, with each of the missions individually, so that nothing that should be clarified is not clarified. So that we work on a good basis of facts. If it's necessary, if it's not necessary, it's going to be boring for you. I apologize for that. So this is how it will go on, and we will see what the discussions bring. I think it's not easy for us because there are two excellent missions, and I don't want to repeat everything that has been said because you're hungry. I thank you, everybody, for coming, and I don't want to take anything away from Joseph. Thank you.
So thank you, Wolfram. It is the moment of wrapping up this user consultation meeting. We had a day and a half, an extremely intense day and a half of deliberations, of questions, some questions having some subtle answers implied, some questions hinting in one or the other direction. But I think this is part of the game, that the two teams are competing and showing their best side and really showing their arguments which make everyone else convinced that this mission or that mission is the best mission to select or to recommend, I should say, by ACEO. So this was really extremely intense. I had a bit of reflection during these 2 days on the role of the Earth Explorers in the larger European Earth observation context, and not only European but global Earth observation context. And maybe I share just some of these thoughts, but you may be all familiar with it, but I think it's worth recalling some of the issues. First, if you look at the Earth Explorers, they are existing, or the concept of the living planet exists now since about 20 years. The first Earth Explorer was launched close to 2010. This is a concept that has been established for quite some time. And my question always is, because I try to improve every single day what we are doing, is this still the best way of doing it? Are there things that can be made better or differently in a modern context, modern meaning that we have today, a very different world in Earth observation and space as compared to 20 years ago? So I'm putting the Earth Explorers into a European context and a global context. European, obviously, you link them with the Copernicus missions. They have been quoted by some of you as possible companions or missions which can go with it or can possibly continue some of the measurements, and also with metrology. And I still think that if you see these Earth Explorers, the two candidates we have seen yesterday and today, if you put them into the Copernicus portfolio or next to the Copernicus portfolio and next to the Meteor portfolio, they're perfectly fit. They are doing things that are new, that are answering burning science questions with the latest technology that does not yet exist, and this is what is one of the two elements of the Earth Explorer. So they are preparing really the future from a science and technology point of view, also for the future Copernicus and meteorology missions. And we had some of these examples, as you know, taking place right now. Krausat is one example, SMOS, another one where we are looking how we can continue them in an operational context through Copernicus in this particular case. So I think there, the Earth Explorers really are, and the two candidates in particular, are perfectly fitting in this context. I'm also comparing it with the new space world, with the constellations that are coming. Okay, there's no constellation doing the FORUM work or the SKIM work for obvious reasons, but how does this fit there? And again, I think despite these new space activities, commercially driven, venture capital funded, there is no one, no company, no venture capital funded company in the world which would ever do the work of FORUM or the work of SKIM. Simply, there is too much research technology required in order to develop those missions, and they would not make business. They would not sell data or services based on information. But there's a huge public need, societal need for both missions, and I'm not saying one more than the other. They are both having extremely important societal needs, and we have all heard the last few days what they are, which obviously new space would never address. So I think, again, there, even if with the arrival of the new space players, there is certainly a role for these Earth Explorers because they would not be taken up by them. In fact, I did ask one of the biggest new space companies recently. I said, look, you know our portfolio extremely well, the current Copernicus missions, the meteorology missions. Do you think that you would do those missions, or how do you see your role in comparison to those? And I was asking them one particular question, because the CO2 mission of Copernicus was a candidate for an Earth Explorer in the past, but now a Copernicus mission. I said, look, CO2 seems to be a very important mission. Would you, as a private company, with your business model and your interest of selling data information, would you ever do a CO2 mission, for example, from your perspective, or could you do it? And the answer was a very clear one: no, never, because we need ESA, we need public entities like ESA and NASA who can fund new technology in order to cover these segments, and therefore they would never do this type of work and not compete in that sense. So I think, looking a bit in the wider context, I think these Earth Explorers are still unique. They still have their justification, I would say, today maybe even more than some years ago, because they show how unique this information are and how valuable they are in order to answer the science questions, but also test new technology as we have seen them. So I think this really reassures at least me, and I hope all of you, that we are on the right track, and either of the two missions which will be selected will fulfill all these criteria, which I was mentally ticking off on how it fits in the larger landscape. Let me go towards a conclusion and really say also, as Wolfram has done already, thank you to all of you. First of all, the teams of FORUM and SKIM, and the one sitting here, but also in the rows here, but also many people not in the room who have done a fantastic job in putting these proposals together. If you have had the time to go through the 300 pages of each of the missions, it's incredible how much science, how much intelligence, how much information is there, which is so unique and so valuable. This is really impressive when you look through it, and when you listen to the talks yesterday and today. It's really incredible, the information which has been collected there, and the excellence which is expressed in these reports and in both of these missions. So really a big thank you to both teams, FORUM and SKIM, for a fantastic work. But also, obviously, this is part of an exercise. This is the User Consultation Meeting. The ACEO, the Advisory Committee for Earth Observation, has questioned and will assess now in private the two proposals. They will have a very tough job because both missions are really excellent from their points of view, and I'm not admiring my dear colleagues and friends in the ACEO, because you will have difficult discussions, because one of them will win and the other one will not. And this is a discussion and a decision or a recommendation which you are making, which is extremely important. We have yesterday heard about Maxwell, we have heard about Steve Hawking, we have heard about Isaac Newton, we have heard about Shakespeare, and the question of the ACEO will be to be or not to be. Forum or SKIM, to be or not to be, and I think this is what you will have to debate this afternoon and tomorrow morning. So really thank you again, everyone, the teams, both of them, the ACEO members, also my ESA colleagues who have helped a lot in working and establishing some of these facts. All of you, scientific community, not only from Europe but also overseas. We have quite a few colleagues from the US. Thank you very much for coming, for asking and contributing this. Thank you very much, and bon appetit for the lunch afterwards. Thank you.